Own the Road with Kelly and Bob, the USA 250 Tour, brought to you by Mueller. Coming up on this episode...
National parks are the best idea we ever had. Absolutely American, absolutely democratic. They reflect us at our best rather than our worst.
We, the people of the United States of America.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob. I'm Bob Phillips.
And I'm Kelly Phillips. We will remind you quickly that the reason for this year-long special we call the USA 250 Tour is to honor our country during its 250th year since independence from Great Britain.
And we're doing that in a number of ways, but mostly by visiting all 50 states and finding one story of national significance in each of them. This week, we're in the state of Wyoming.
The place we're visiting is one that has no equals. No other place is so grand, possibly on the entire planet. And that's because this week we're taking you to Yellowstone National Park.
Yeah, and Yellowstone is a place you simply have to visit for yourself. So we're going to leave it to Lisa Diekman to entice you to visit Yellowstone National Park, her favorite place on Earth.
I was born in Oakland, California. We moved up to Harrison, Idaho, a small town on Lake Coeur d'Alene, when I was in the first grade. Town of 250, a 3-room schoolhouse, and we lived there for 2.5 years before we moved to Spokane when I was in the 4th grade. That time in Idaho was, I think, really pivotal for me. My grandparents ran the grocery store. It was pretty much the grocery store, Rose's Cafe, and One Shot Charlie's Bar, and the lake. Then spent the rest of my life in Spokane until I went off to college. After college, I worked on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs, and I loved that experience. I liked the people, I liked the work ethic, but I wasn't really that interested in finance. I took my backpack and traveled around Southeast Asia by myself for 3 months. I started out in Hong Kong, China, Indonesia.
Lisa Diekman's worldly travels taught her one thing for sure, that her heart was in the world of conservation.
Lisa didn't just want to save the planet. She wanted to make sure everyone else could experience it too, and maybe have the same feelings she has.
And what was your passion for conservation?
I think it's growing up. As a kid, I complained, like, what the heck, why can't we go to Disneyland like my other friends? But we went camping on the St. Joe River and places around Idaho and Washington, Noma Falls and Oregon. One day I was reading a newspaper and saw this ad for executive director of the Yellowstone Park Foundation. And I said to my husband, I think I should apply for this job. Would that be okay? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. You're never going to get it. So I applied and I got the job. I don't know how, I don't know why, but it was very fortuitous and it was my dream job. So we moved to Montana and I became the first executive director of the Yellowstone Park Foundation. The Yellowstone Association, the official education partner of Yellowstone National Park, was established in 1932 as the Yellowstone Museum and Library Association. And the Yellowstone Park Foundation was established in 1996, so I was their first executive director. Yellowstone Park Foundation was the official philanthropy partner of Yellowstone National Park. We were started with a $200,000 seed grant from ConocoPhillips. So we built up our donor base from 25 donors, our board members, and a few others. The mission of Yellowstone Forever is to protect, preserve, and enhance Yellowstone National Park through education and philanthropy. Our vision is that Yellowstone endures forever. And our purpose is to provide opportunities for all people to connect with Yellowstone, turning wonder into impact. And we may not do that with just people in the park, but it's sometimes with people who never will have the chance to visit Yellowstone, opportunities to connect with the park through things like the Old Faithful webcam that we fund or the virtual educational experiences. It's not quite the same, but it can still be incredibly impactful. And Yellowstone is the world's first and most famous national park.
There are no words we can say or even pictures we can show you that will even come close to seeing Yellowstone for yourself. Simply put, Yellowstone features dramatic canyons, alpine rivers, lush forests, hot springs, and gushing geysers, including its most famous, Old Faithful.
It's also home to hundreds of animal species, including bears, wolves, bison, elk, and antelope.
So the history of Yellowstone goes back millions of years when it was formed by the great volcano. It's the land of fire and ice. So we've had volcanoes, we've had glaciers. Yellowstone as a place has been around for hundreds of thousands.
And the
years.
people who eventually occupied parts of Yellowstone?
There are 27 affiliated tribes of Yellowstone National Park who spent time in Yellowstone, either living there, passing through. So Yellowstone has a very important history with indigenous peoples.
And then at some point, the European settlers have come to what we now know as America. And then we have things like the Monroe Doctrine and the westward expansion. What happened to Yellowstone during all of that?
Yes. So Yellowstone National Park was explored. People who came, like Thomas Moran, who painted a picture of the upper and lower falls of Yellowstone National Park, took that back to Congress and said, this place is so special and magical, we should establish this as the world's first national parks.
Tell us about the wonder of Yellowstone National Park.
Yellowstone is a place of superlatives. There's more geysers and hot springs in Yellowstone than the rest of the world combined. The largest high alpine lake in North America, more free-roaming wildlife, a greater concentration of free-roaming wildlife than anywhere else in the lower 48 states. And, for some people, they only get to visit Yellowstone one time. I've gone hundreds of times, and I can tell you I never get tired of it, and the wonder never ceases to amaze me. Every day in Yellowstone is special, and you can go anywhere in the world and not speak the language, but if you say Yellowstone or Coca-Cola, people understand you. And when I have conversations with people and say I'm from Montana, they're like, oh, okay, where is that? I said, near Yellowstone. Oh, Yellowstone. People want to share their Yellowstone stories. Those Yellowstone stories, the wonder and the awe that they have experienced with their family, with their friends, by themselves, is something that stays with them and that they want to share. It is hard to have a bad day in Yellowstone.
How big and how important is the existence of Yellowstone to the history, the culture, the future even, of our country?
Some people might say that, we're protecting Yellowstone for sentimental reasons, but it's more than that. It really is a reflection of our place in this world and our tie to who we are as human beings. It's more than just protecting the park. It's protecting the things that are most important to us. It's kind of like what Wallace Stegner said, is we just need those wild places. We need to know that they're there and that we can just drive to their edge and look in to remind ourselves how important that is to our geography of hope. And he also said that national parks are the best idea we ever had. Absolutely American, absolutely democratic. They reflect us at our best rather than our worst. And there are so many important things that people are doing in this world, good things for other people. I think that our role is to ensure special places like Yellowstone are here forever, because they do reassure us of our place here on this earth and how fortunate we are.
yes, we are fortunate indeed that we have places like Yellowstone National Park, that our world has not yet been paved over with concrete and steel, that the beauty and the wildlife will be there for us and for future generations.
And that Yellowstone has now spawned all of these other national parks with all kinds of beauty, all kinds of wildlife, all kinds of ecosystems. All I can say is when you visit a place like Yellowstone, you feel both very small and very lucky.
Yeah, and that's something Lisa Diekman told us when we talked with her there at Yellowstone Forever Foundation. She said that she always had something inside of her that was attracted to places like this, and she always had something inside of her that made her strive to do things she felt were important, even if no one else thought she could or should do those things. And that all of that begins with self-discovery.
What did you learn when you were backpacking by yourself? What did you learn about yourself?
Well, I think I've always been, I guess I had parents who never said, well, you can't do something that you want to try. And so I don't know if they ever thought that I would do these things, but they didn't stop me. So I've kind of always had an attitude of, well, maybe I can, not maybe I can't. And along the way, I've made mistakes, and along the way, I've had rejections, and things always sort of ended up just probably the way they were supposed to be. And so I've been really fortunate that way. Yeah, working on Wall Street when most of the people on Wall Street were men, going to Yale College for my undergraduate degree, the 9th class of women at Yale after something like 271 years. No one ever said you can't go. They just didn't think I would go.
At what point did you come to Yellowstone Forever?
After graduating from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, I was connected to Jim Dutcher, who was working on a movie about wolves in the Sawtooth region of Idaho for ABC's World of Discovery. And that was my first job after graduate school. I had gotten married, and my husband was working in New York, and we had met in college. And I realized that after 3 or 4 months, this is great. It was a short-term project. I was doing all the research. I wasn't really doing the movie-making part, but part of it, I was loving it. I love Idaho, and I thought, I should probably move back to Connecticut because I'm married now. And I got a phone call from the Yale University saying we need a director of development at the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. They haven't had one before. Would you do it? And I'm like, well, I've written a grant and got $500 to study wolves in Yellowstone. So I became the first director of development at the Yale School of Forestry.
So we established the world's first national park, but at that point, we don't really have a parent organization to oversee it, to run it. It's just Congress has declared this. What happened then?
First protectors of Yellowstone National Park was the U.S. Army. And if you go to Mammoth Hot Springs, Fort Yellowstone, that is where the Army set up camp to protect Yellowstone in the best way they knew how. 2.2 million acres is a big place to protect for just a few people, but that's how it all began, was the U.S. Army protecting Yellowstone. And then when the Park Service was established in 1916, that transfer of protection responsibilities took place with the establishment of the National Park Service.
One of the things that I know that the U.S. Army had to attend to was poaching and all of the hunting of the different animals, and that was a problem.
Well, there were certainly many stories around that. One of the most famous is efforts to protect the bison in Yellowstone National Park. Yellowstone is a place of superlatives, and one of those superlatives is it's the last place in the lower 48 states with a wild, free-roaming herd of bison. So in the early 1900s, there were about 23 bison discovered somewhere close to Yellowstone Lake. And the millions of other bison that had roamed the Great Plains were now gone. And so the park rounded up all those bison and took them to the Lamar area. The Lamar Buffalo Ranch was established to restore Yellowstone's wild free-roaming bison population to something that was more sustainable than 23. And they added to that herd with two other herds, I believe, the Goodnow herd, which I think was in Texas, and then maybe one other population from possibly a zoo in New York, but wild or native actual bison from other places to help restore the herd.
So let's be clear about what was happening with the bison and other animals. They weren't being hunted to extinction by the Native Americans who had occupied this area as much as by the European and American settlers, were they?
That's exactly true, yes. One of the commitments that we've made at Yellowstone forever is to tribal engagement with the 27 affiliated tribes and to recognize the Native voice in Yellowstone. And we have also made a significant commitment to the Bison Conservation and Transfer Facility, which is an opportunity to transfer bison from Yellowstone to Fort Peck in Montana. And from Fort Peck, those bison are then transferred to other tribes throughout North America, including once via FedEx to Alaska.
You sent buffalo via FedEx?
Yes, via FedEx. FedEx can deliver just about anything, including a wild free-roaming bison. But what is so beautiful about this project is that it's really not just about natural conservation, but about cultural conservation. And we've expanded with an investment the Bison Conservation Transfer Facility so that more bison can be transferred and rehomed to the tribes. And we had a ceremony to celebrate the expansion of this facility. And we had one of the speakers, an elder from one of the tribes, say that, so many words, basically, what you did to our people was wrong, and that was not okay. But what you are doing today is helping to make up for that, and we thank you because you are helping us to bring our brothers home.
What does that mean to you?
Yeah.
What does that feel like?
Even just saying it gives me goosebumps. That
Me too.
It is very gracious to have somebody say that, but it also really feels like we're contributing something and making up for something that should never have happened, but we can make things right again.
Everywhere you looked was magical.
Yeah.
Beauty that we found hard to describe.
And
Have you found words for that?
Oh, yeah.
Even if you take pictures, they don't do it justice.
No.
We feel so small in Yellowstone.
So small, but also limitless sometimes.
Yes.
It's that.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. Twice a year, Yellowstone hosts a REYP. It's like the beginning of the season for seasonal rangers. It's usually the superintendent or the assistant superintendent who welcomes the group and says, welcome if you're new, welcome if you're coming back. And so the assistant superintendent said, I was just going to tell you a little bit of the story. I went to the Louvre last year with my wife and two daughters, and one of my daughters looked over and said, Dad, look. They were in an art room where the Mona Lisa was. And he's like, yeah, yes, the Mona Lisa. He goes, nobody's looking at the Mona Lisa. Everybody was taking pictures of it. He said, I want you to remember that when you are in the park, don't forget to look and encourage people to look at what they're experiencing through their own eyes, not just through their camera.
It's not just that it's also just this feeling of being there.
Being there.
That's what it really got to us, because I don't know how it could get into your soul without being there and being immersed in it. And everywhere you look, like Kelly said, is magical.
So we partner with the park on some programs. We offer some programs ourselves. And we bring kids to the park who might never otherwise visit Yellowstone. A lot of kids from Montana, Idaho, Wyoming. I've been many places where I run into people who talk about the time that their fourth grade class stayed out at the Lamar Buffalo Ranch and what they saw. We also bring kids who are from places like Chicago or Lowell, Massachusetts, and at the final campfire chat, they'll share things like, my family's a fifth generation family from Lowell, Massachusetts, and nobody's ever left Lowell. This experience has changed my life, and I'm going to take that back and share this with my family. Or a kid who's on the porch at a cabin in Lamar comes running in to tell everybody, come quick, come quick. Everybody's like, what's going on? You have to hurry, you have to hurry. Look at that. It was a black shadow moving across a hillside. He had never seen a cloud shadow before. And imagine, what you're experiencing and thinking. If you live in a city, you don't see those hillsides. You don't see those clouds casting shadows that move across a hillside. Or kids who say, I didn't realize Yellowstone was so three-dimensional. They'd only seen it in the pictures. It doesn't quite convey that sense of awe. Or someone that says, I saw Grand Prismatic, but in a magazine, but I thought they'd photoshopped it. No, it's for real. Yellowstone was established to protect the resources for the future and for the enjoyment of park visitors. So the protection of that clear water is incredibly important. One of the projects that we fund is the Native Fish Conservation Program, and all of the lakes and rivers in Yellowstone, the conservation of native fish is one of Yellowstone's commitment to its mission. And so native fish conservation has been something that we've invested in heavily. And it's not just about the fish, it's about the water, and it's about the wildlife, the 17 species of wildlife that survive as important food source, that native fish population.
What about the geysers? That's one of the things that you notice as you drive through Yellowstone. You don't even have to get out of your car to see that, if you don't want to.
Right.
What's the science behind this at all?
Well, the science behind the geysers is pretty incredible. I can tell you, years ago, we worked on a film about the geysers of Yellowstone, the thermophiles of Yellowstone. Walter Cronkite was the narrator, and what Walter Cronkite says was, this is the next frontier. This is the next thing after walking on the moon, is the thermophiles of Yellowstone. And those thermophiles that are in some of those hot pools have unlocked the key to things like DNA fingerprinting, cures for cancer. And so another reason why it's so important to save every part, because there is a reason why these things are put on Earth. So Walter Cronkite was quite fascinated with the thermal features of Yellowstone National Park, because he knew that there was a lot left still to discover right here on Earth.
You've been to the park hundreds of times. Do you remember your first trip?
I can't say I remember my first trip. I think I was too young, but I do remember my first trip before coming to work for the Yellowstone Park Foundation, and I was with a board member who was giving me just a little tour of Yellowstone. And we talked about how grand and big and impressive Yellowstone is, and 2.2 million acres. And we're driving past the Blacktail Plateau shortly before hell roaring. And he said, oh, let's pull over here. I'm like, okay, well, that looks like a nice view. Yeah, just, like another Yellowstone view. And gets out of the car and knocks on a tree. And a little bird stuck his head out of a hole there in the tree. And that just got me. Because when you take the time to slow down and not just look at the big landscapes, but look carefully, you'll see the bear marks, the claws of a bear. You'll see the little birds' houses. You'll see the otter trails in the mud. And so I think that has stuck with me forever.
After the hundreds of times you've been there, are you still in awe every time you go?
Every time. And I am not exaggerating. I love to exaggerate. I am not exaggerating. I am in awe every time I go to Yellowstone.
What does it do for your soul?
It reminds me of how little I am and also of the limitless possibilities.
Yellowstone National Park truly is a place where the earth literally breathes beneath your feet, and the wild feels close enough for you to touch it. Yellowstone, it offers a brand of magic that simply can't be captured in a photo, and it can't even be described in words. You just have to experience it for yourself. But it is a reminder. Take a look at the little things around you and be amazed at what you'll find. Thanks for listening to this week's edition of On the Road with Kelly and Bob, part of the USA 250 Tour. Also, a big thank you to our sponsor, Mueller. You don't want to miss a thing of our USA 250 Tour. The best thing to do is to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, as well as our YouTube page. And don't forget, you can listen to our podcast wherever you get your podcast, or simply download that free Odyssey app. Listen anytime, anywhere.